Hello everybody, how's everybody doing? We have an exciting day in physics today. Terrible day for mathematical physics, sorry. But great day for physics. And what is this site about? This site, rational science. We're about rational science. That's what we're about. That's what we're about. And why is our site rational? Well, because we do everything differently than everybody else out there. What does everybody out there do? Well, they do this. They do ether. They do particles. That's the world out there. Everybody does everything with particles. Okay, and even when they do waves, they do particles. This is their wave model. What's moving there? Particles. That's what you see vibrating there. And so a wave is a motion of particles. That's what it is. What do we propose instead? Well, we propose a universe that is interconnected. For the first time, we have an interconnected universe. We're saying all atoms are interconnected. So whereas the rest of the world has this vision that everything is just discrete particles running around, we have an interconnected world. So that's what's new, that's what's different, okay? And so this takes us to some of the differences. You've got the rest of the world, they have descriptions. They don't have an explanation, a mechanism that you can sink your teeth into, the majority out there at least. And they're also in the movement of concepts. Instead, we're in the world of explanations. We explain mechanisms, and we're in the movement of objects. Another difference is their atom. The atom that people use out there is the planetary model that we've inherited from Rutherford and Bohr. That's the little electron bead that's going around the bowling ball. And that's what we use, or what they use at least, for ionization, electricity. That's the atom they use. And then they deny it. We have a different atom, so just be aware. So whenever we talk about the atom, we're about explaining things with our atom. We've got a different atom, therefore the explanation is going to be different. And you can find out a lot about this in the book, downloadable book. It's in the description. Okay, so it's a free book. You can download it, and it'll put you up to date on the rope model. Another difference with the rest of the world is this: we have a different scientific method, or a different version of the scientific method. Okay, and we put mathematical physics in its entirety under religion. All it has is irrational theories, irrational proposals. And one of the reasons for that, among others, is that it relies heavily on evidence. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Okay? And one of the people who emphasizes evidence is the fellow we're going to talk about today, Richard Dawkins. He's a biologist, okay? And I don't know if he's a biologist because he's never defined the word life, and that's what biology studies or analyzes, tries to explain. And so he never defined it, and so I think of him more as a caricature of a scientist. One of the reasons is, again, he works without definitions. He doesn't use definitions. They don't have definitions in all of mathematical physics, and obviously in biology they don't seem to have many definitions either. They can't even define life. I know paleontologists have no idea how to define a mass extinction or a background extinction. You look at background extinction, and what do you find? You find a rate. Mathematics. A rate of background extinction. And so nowhere will you find in the world of paleontology an analysis of how one species dies, because there is no term, no notion of no concept of the disappearance of one species, except the only one we're concerned about, well, maybe a couple. One is Neanderthal and the other one's woolly, because those happened relatively recently, right, a few thousand years ago. But then all other species that ever existed on planet Earth, they never talk about the disappearance of one species. How did one species disappear? No, they talk about the rate of extinction. the rate. How many were dying in the background, whatever that is. So no, they don't have any definitions anywhere, and Dawkins is no different in that sense. Okay, and Dawkins synthesizes his notion of science in one of his presentations, and he says the following. He brings up the parable of the old teacher. He had an old teacher, and he says one of his teachers believed in the Golgi apparatus. He said it was an artifact, that he didn't think it really existed. And that's what he taught for 15 years. He taught his students this. And one day a cell biologist from the United States apparently gave a lecture and demonstrated, right? We demonstrated science, right? We prove beyond all possible doubt, skepticism, doubt, religion, right? That the Golgi apparatus was real. Okay, and our old man strode to the front of the lecture hall, shook him by the hand, and said, "My dear fellow, I wish to thank you. I have been wrong these 15 years. And he says that all the students applauded the fact that this guy proved their teacher wrong. Okay, and so good old Dawkins uses this as an example of what science is all about. Okay, he said that is science at its best, and he says that's the very opposite of faith. That's knowing when you're wrong and even being pleased to be disproved. So there you have it in a nutshell, Dawkins' view of what science is and what it's supposed to be and what it's all about. Okay, and yeah, we have a little problem with all that. I'll get to that today, and that's what the talk is about essentially. And so what does Dawkins do? He says, he talks about faith. Okay, he says, what baffles me is the way that our society has limply bought into the idea that faith should somehow be treated with exaggerated respect. I guess he's talking about quantum mechanics. You know, all this faith that all these people have, no one questions it. Okay? Even secular individuals have come to accept the idea that faith should somehow be immune to criticism simply because it is faith. Well, you would gladly criticize somebody's political views or artistic tastes or their football team, etc. When it comes to faith, we are all expected to back off. Yeah, I guess, again, it looks like he's talking about quantum mechanics. I mean, you know, you can't challenge that. You have to have faith. Otherwise, you're deemed as a crackpot, right? Without this convention of good manners which pervades our society, faith couldn't withstand criticism because it has no resources with which to do the withstanding. Yeah, he's talking about mathematical physics in its entirety. Faith, that's all they have. Faith, because they have, all they do is just talk about, you know, what they proved, what the evidence has convinced them of. That's what the whole thing is about. And I'm not going to put words in their mouth. They're putting words in their own mouth. Here you have more examples of that as we go along. Just keep an eye on that because that's the issue with Dawkins. He says, evolution is only a theory. People say this, you know, against the evolutionists, against the people who you know, paleontologists, biologists, geologists in general, these people vouch for the theory of evolution. And you have on the other side, usually the Christians, at least in the Western world, and they say, well, no, we believe in God, and we think God did all this, you know, and he set things in motion and so on. And God made us like we are in one piece. And so this is where the debate comes in, right? And so what does Dawkins say? He says, it is ironic that this only a theory actually stems from the non-arrogance of science. Okay? Because scientists are careful enough and cautious enough to say that everything they know is only a theory. Okay? Yeah, I agree, because science is only about theory. So the question is, you know, where does all this evidence thingy come in, where they try to prove theories, which means that they convince someone of their explanation? That, you know, the convincing part That's got nothing to do with the theory, with the explanation. And so they emphasize the evidence, the belief, whether you believe in the theory or not, the proof part. That's all religion, but that's what they emphasize, not the explanation, the objective explanation. That's where we have a problem. Okay, and so he says everything is, they know it's only a theory, which is just awaiting this proof. Again, proof? No, we don't prove theories. What does he mean the theory is awaiting this proof? Does he mean that people will stop believing in it? Is that what he means by disproof? So it's a question, they were believing in that theory, in that explanation, and now they don't believe in it anymore because someone disproved it. So he's emphasizing the proof part, not the objective explanation, but the subjective proof, what the evidence showed to you. Not to me, but to you. That's the issue, okay? And yeah, the crackpot index, if you want to offend one of these guys, all you have to say is, oh, evolution is only a theory. Oh man, that'll drive them up the wall. It'll drive them up the wall and say, what do you mean, just a theory? It says 10 points for arguing that a current well-established theory is only a theory, as if this were a point somehow against it, okay? Yeah, so if you want to offend one of these mathematicians, all you have to say is that their theory is only a theory. Oh, it's just a theory. Yeah, and so he clarifies that. He says, oh, no, wait a minute, we got to clarify this thing. And that's when the theory morphs into a fact. Very slyly, okay? It says, the word theory can be used to mean something that is speculative and tentative in common everyday speech. Scientists often use it in a much more positive sense. I think that the easiest way to use it, theory, right, is in the ordinary language word fact. You see where he's going with it? He's turning his theory into a fact. He shoved it down your throat whether you like it or not. In the ordinary language sense of the word fact, evolution is a fact. Okay? So now the theory somehow morphed into a fact, So interesting. I thought we were going to talk about science. We were talking about objective science, what someone explains to someone else so that they can ponder and think about it and go home and say, well, what this guy said makes a lot of sense, or it doesn't make sense, or whatever. No. They're emphasizing you have to believe it because we've just turned it into a fact. The theory, the tentative theory somehow morphed into a fact. Right in front of your very eyes. Metamorphosis, that is what it's called. Okay? And so good old Dawkins says, the evidence that makes it a fact is partly fossil evidence, okay? Partly comparative evidence, looking at modern species and comparing their bones, their organs, their structures generally, and especially their molecules, their genes at the molecular level. This is extremely persuasive and powerful evidence. What is evidence used for? To persuade, to get you, to convince you, to get you to change your mind, to accept the theory as a fact. That's what evidence is for. That's why we don't use evidence in science. It's only in religion where they use evidence, because the point of evidence is to persuade and convince. And good old Dawkins never realized that in his 100 years of schooling. Okay? So we have a problem with his notion of science, this notion that people have that, oh, I'm going to run an experiment. Oh, what are you going to run the experiment for? To collect evidence. Oh, what are you going to collect evidence for? To persuade, to show that my theory is a fact. For now. Until someone disproves it. So that's what these people think is the scientific method. Proof and fact. And then disproof and verification and evidence, coming from another guy who said, I got new evidence. All of relativity is wrong. All of quantum is wrong. Because I have a new evidence. So it's a question of persuading people. And the question is, can you convince of everyone on planet Earth, the 8 billion people today, right? Can we convince them that evolution is a fact? And I'm sure if we run the microphone, through all the congregations out there, the Buddhists, the Hindus, I think we're going to find a lot of people that won't like this theory of evolution. They'll say, well, no, God made us like this. And so the question is, it's a fact for whom? What do you mean, a fact? But see, this is what they have in their mind. They believe so much in their theory that it's converted into a fact, and they spread fact, like preachers and pastors. They're no different. They're no different. They spread this out not as something objective. They spread it out as a fact. Okay? And nobody believes them anyway, because a lot of people out there still continue with their belief, because that's what they're being taught in Sunday school. Okay? See, it says, more evidence again, when you compare the genes of animals and plants, you find that the pattern of resemblance is a branching tree, and that branching tree could only be a family tree. Okay, this is an explanation. If you explain it like that, no problem. Don't bring your fact, your belief, your shoving it down my throat kind of thing, you know. Just tell the theory, you know, your explanation, and we'll consider it. The jury will consider it, okay? Other very persuasive evidence. Again, persuasive evidence. That's what they're into. And it's not only him, it's the entire mathematical establishment. This is what people learn in high school and college, that science is about persuading through evidence, okay? And then when you go to Sunday school, they have different evidence, a different type of persuasion comes in. They do it through the book, the good book. And every religion has their own good book or good books, right? Is the geographic distribution of animals and plants on islands and continents. They are exactly where they should, or we should expect them to be if evolution is a fact. Is a fact. And again, he can't get rid of those words, evidence and fact. Okay? He doesn't talk about really theory, because he knows that people listen theory and they say, oh, it's tentative. It hasn't been proven. And he said, no, it's been proven. It's a fact. That's what he wants to emphasize, make sure you understood. All creatures are the result of millions of years of natural selection. Okay, and one of the problems there, and that's with that term natural selection, there are different versions. I'll get into that. And one guy asked him, says, is there a conflict between evolution and religion? Okay? Because maybe there is no conflict, and maybe you know, he's spinning his wheels for nothing. Okay? So he goes in there and he says, uses an analogy. He calls it, or a parable. It's the parable of the Improbable Mountain. Okay? And he says, what if you went up to the top of the cliff, right, and you found an eye? Well, he says, you know, that eye is so sophisticated. It's one of the most sophisticated organs in our body. You know, it's very unlikely, very improbable that it was made in one shot. Okay? It took a long time to make this thing. It's like, you know, when you build something in your garage, in your shop, you know, you don't build something in 2 seconds and say, voila, you know, like by magic. No, it takes time. You have to put the screws in there. You got to build the thing, right, step by step. And that's more or less what he's talking about. He says, you know, that eye is up there on the mountain. You found it there. You're not going to think that that eye was made in 2 seconds with a magic wand, okay? And so you have these two possibilities. One is that the eye just climbed up the mountain in one shot, just jumped up there. And the other one is the evolution, the version, which is the slope there, the step-by-step approach, that this eye took millions of years and went through all these different stages to be built. So the improbable mountain is that you can't do this with a single shot, like God waving his magic wand. No, you got to do it step by step, he says. Okay? Okay? And again, that's the objective explanation. No problem there. Okay? Some people believe it, some people don't believe it. It's not a fact to everybody. Some people accept it, some people don't. Okay? And people say, well, Bill, what do you think? Irrelevant. I'll keep it to myself. Okay? Because the issue here is not what I believe. It's what I can explain. When you call me to the conference, say, Bill, explain evolution. then I'll give you my version. I'll explain evolution objectively, and I'll try, because it's very human to try to do so all the time to convince people, I'll try not to persuade and convince and convert you. My only intention really is for you to listen to my theory of evolution or my theory of God or whatever, how we got here, okay? And I can explain it to you, and you take it for what you want to take it with. Okay, it's up to you. What you believe or not is irrelevant, at least in a scientific context. Now, if you want to talk religion, belief, what people believe, well, let's go to the bar, get a couple beers, or go to the water cooler, and we can do some small talk. But if we're going to do science, we got to leave it strictly to objective explanations. Now, in the course of explanation, of course, we get excited and we try to convince the other guy, no, I'm correct and you're wrong. That's essentially what you're saying, right? We all do that. It's very human to do that. But we at least have to be able to distinguish that part is the religion part. That's what good old Dawkins has not realized yet in all his years of studying. So he says, he continues, he says, well, eye along the slope is a little bit better than the one before it. You have all these incremental steps where improvements in the eye, right? And at the end of a long period of non-random natural selection, you've accumulated lots of these steps, and the product is far too improbable to have come about in a single step of chance, a jump. Okay, so he's putting the weight of rationale behind evolution. And there's nothing wrong with that, like saying, look, let me show you why William of Occam's rule, is applicable here. You got to look at the most sound, most common sense version, and this is the most common sense version according to Dawkins. So he says, but if he stops there, he's okay. But then he goes on and he says, that's why you should believe it. That's why it's a fact. And if you deny it, you're an ignoramus. That's where we have a problem. Okay? Because now he's trying to shove it down your throat. And that's okay, because in the sense that, again, if you're at the bar and you just exchange opinions, that's fine. Anything goes there, because you're doing small talk, you're doing ordinary speech. But when you go to a conference, when you talk to the masses and you say, look, this is what I propose, that's where you should stop, okay? And let people make up their own minds, and not, him telling him that's science. Science is not the explanation, the objective explanation. Science is the belief part, the faith part. He's got a faith too. So he criticizes faith, but he's faithful. Okay, he wrote a book called The Selfish Gene, in which he essentially outlines some of his ideas on evolution. Says that's what drives all organisms, including human beings. The prime aspect of that of evolution is reproduction, he says. That comes from Darwin, right? Says, so what drives all organisms, including human beings, the drive to reproduce their own genetic makeup, okay? Sounds like he's interpreting there, but at least, well, if that's his interpretation, fine, no problem. That's pretty standard Darwinism. In any era, the organisms that live contain the genes of an unbroken line of successful ancestors. It has to be true. He introduced the word true. Now we have truth. We found out last week that for Mahatma Gandhi, truth is God. And so he says truth is something else. Truth is evolution. So we have differences when we start using these vague words, these opinionated words. It's the truth. Well, the truth to whom? To you or to me? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about the objective explanation, or about truth and about what is a fact? Okay? Plenty of the ancestors' competitors were not successful. They all died, but not a single one of your ancestors died young, or failed to copulate, or failed to rear at least one child by definition. Or otherwise, we would be here. That's what he's saying, okay? You have therefore inherited the genes which are a non-random sample of the genes in every generation, non-random in the direction of being good at surviving, okay? So that in a nutshell is what evolution is about, okay? So he's essentially exposing the worldly wisdom again among biologists, paleontologists, geologists, all these people out there, so-called scientists, right, that study evolution. Well, they all believe in this synthesis, okay? Okay, he continues there. He says the following. He says, in the selfish gene, he said, we have in our genetic makeup the drive to persist, to accomplish goals. This is genetic, he says, this drive that we have, this push forward, okay? Natural selection favored persisting in seeking goals, like, for example, hunters who followed herds until they caught what they needed to survive, right? Nowadays, we hunt money or, or a nice new house, or we try to finish a novel or a political victory. So he thinks, because we have a problem here, we have a difference with what Darwin really said, and different people picked up different pieces of what Darwin said, and they use them in different contexts. We have to be a little bit careful about that. And here are, when you look up, the evolution, the natural selection thingy that Darwin came up with, you find the 4 points of Darwin's theory of evolution. And they are: individuals of a species are not identical. Okay. Traits are passed from generation to generation. More offspring are born than can survive. And finally, only the survivors of the competition for resources will reproduce. Well, there's a little bit of a problem with a lot of these things. They're very general, okay, and that's good as a foundation for a theory, to present an objective theory, okay? No problem there. What is the problem? The problem is that people understand different things from this. And here, let me show you an example here. We have two versions, at least. I think there's more, of the theory of evolution. And one is the one that Darwin had in mind, which is reproduction. You reproduce, the guy who reproduces the most kids, those are the ones that survive, or have a better chance of surviving and reproducing more, and so on. And so those are the lines we have today, the ones that reproduce the most. Then you have the business guys. They understood something totally different from Darwinian evolution. They think in survival of the fittest, because they're thinking always of not of how many kids they reproduce. They don't care about that at all. That's biology. That's something else, physiology or whatever. No, they're into something else. They're into competition. Oh, you have to compete against the enemy. Who is the enemy? The guy across the street, the guy who opened up the same type of store that you did. So you opened up a restaurant, he opened up a restaurant. And COVID shut them both down. Okay, so they're thinking of competition. They're thinking of rugged, laissez-faire capitalism, survival of the fittest. Well, that's a little different than saying the guy who reproduces the most. So, what is the theory of evolution? Which aspect of it are we talking about? And again, we have all these little variations there. That you pass your traits on, genetic stuff like that. That's also a different notion than what these guys are saying. So we have different notions, and I can only give you my notion. Okay, here's Bill Gaede's notion of evolution. You'll hear it here for the first time. Okay, this is a different way of visualizing evolution. This is my synthesis of evolution. Okay, and it goes like this. It's he who hasn't died is alive. How do you like that? You say, Bill, you're crazy. What do you say? What do you mean he who hasn't died is alive? What does that have to do with evolution? Well, I give the example, and one day I had this when it came to my head. There was a spider, and I threw something on it, a stone or something, and killed it. And out of her belly, it was a female spider, and out of her belly came, I'd say 100 at least, little tiny spiders, just moving away from ground zero. They were running for their lives. And I was stunned. I saw all those. I had killed the mother, and her back broke, and all these little spiders came out. I killed them too afterward. I couldn't have these spiders inside my house. So the issue was, and I started thinking, well, you know, evolution here. Again, I give the example of the 5 Neanderthals. They're in a cave, the last 5 Neanderthals, and a stone falls on them. You know, and that caused the extinction of the Neanderthals? No, what caused the extinction of the Neanderthals is how they became 5. That's the mechanism we have to zero in on. But these people never picked up on that, and they look at, again, evidence. They look at stuff that has no relevance, and among those we have this competition thing between species. We outcompeted the Neanderthals. That's how they disappeared. They have these notions. Why? Because, again, we don't have a good grasp of what evolution is. And I'm saying that throughout history, you have the sifting of death. So death kills, you know, we have the scythe, the grim reaper, comes in and kills whatever, plants and animals. Just kills. Whoever the grim reaper doesn't kill, that's who's alive today. So that's another version. So we have the version from the reproduction point of view, which I just showed that is not necessarily right, because here we had the spider had 100 kids, and I killed them all, so none of them survived, even though she was very fertile, very prolific, and none of them survived. She may have outcompeted other spiders or other insects, whatever, that she ate, and it didn't help her much because I killed them all. I stopped her lying right there and then. So death was a little more important than reproduction or competition. And a lot of it has to do being at the right place at the right time, or being at the wrong place at the wrong time, you know, that sort of thing. Maybe you're unlucky. Maybe you're the toughest guy in the group. You're the most physically successful, etc., etc., etc. You were going to have 10 kids because you really had the fertility built in you by God or by Mother Nature or whoever. And it turns out you die. You don't get to reproduce. And this little weakling, you know, a little guy with his glasses, he goes out there, he has sex, he doesn't die, and he has 10 kids. And so did the survival of the fittest, was that the guy who made it here? No, it's not the fittest in that sense. It's whoever didn't die at the wrong place at the wrong time. So we have different notions of evolution. We have to try to zero in on these notions because we have like too many things in the so-called theory of evolution. That's why I don't like to talk about fact either. I want specifics. What is your theory of evolution? So you explain it to me objectively, and then we can deal with that. But to say that, oh, the theory of evolution is a fact and you got to swallow it and we're going to shove it on every kid in school, whether they like it or not, I don't know about that. You know, there are opinions and opinions. And one thing is, yeah, you can teach that, no problem. I have no problem with teaching evolution. But, you know, on the other hand, I have no problem with the religious folk presenting their stuff in school as well. You don't have to take it as truth. On the contrary, I think it's a good way of comparing things out there. Like for the kids to make up their own mind. Okay, here's the evolution. Here's what the church does, you know, or what religion does, or, you know, so-called religion, and you compare them and let him reach his own conclusion. And you might say, well, they get enough of that in church, you know, at the Sunday school. And to some degree, that's also true. You know, they don't teach evolution in Sunday school. So we teach evolution in school. You teach God and whatever in Sunday school. So that's how the world is divided. Okay. Where did I come from? Where did we come from? Well, as far as I know, I came from my mother, you know, and I think she came from her mother and so on. But they ask him the question, there's no reason why we are here. Okay, no reason. Okay, I was using why in the sense of the explanation. What is the ultimate purpose for which the universe came into existence? I believe there isn't one. Okay, If instead you ask, what is the purpose of a bird's wing? I can say that in a special Darwinian sense, it is to help it to fly, therefore to survive, therefore to reproduce the genes that gave it those wings that make it fly. Okay? It's a silly question, so don't ask it. Religious people are asking a silly question. Maybe they're asking a silly question, but you gave the wrong answer. Okay? Let me give you my answer to that question. I got that in my book, Why God Doesn't Exist. And this is what he should have answered. Dawkins has not figured out what the question entails. In the instant context, the question of why, purpose, reason, invariably implies a thinking entity that set everything in motion with a goal in mind. So whenever you ask the question, why are we here? And it turns out it's one of the questions that you'll find under physics, which shouldn't be there, because a why are we here is a question of philosophy. It's a question of purpose and reason. And it already implies a creator, for lack of a word, an intelligence, whatever you want to call it. Okay? It involves that someone had something in mind, a goal in mind for humanity, for the universe, for whatever matter. Okay? The question, why are we here, is already biased in favor of God. It already embodies God. It already embodies intelligence. That's what he should have answered. Not saying it's a silly question, you shouldn't ask it. No, you can ask it. I'll just give you my answer. My answer is that you're already implying God when you ask that question. That's what you're asking. The question comes down to, why did God create us? For what purpose? That's what the why question in that context means. And that's why, so you can't just dismiss it and say it's a silly question. Well, maybe it is a silly question, but that's not the answer. The answer is, your question already embodies God. It already includes God inside that question. That's the problem. So the guy who asked it is already assuming God. And that's what you got to point out to them so that they're aware that that's where the problem is. Okay? And so what do they say instead? Well, they say it was self-created, the universe self-created, and therefore, of course, there's no purpose because the universe, there's no intelligence there that kicked it off. It's just a mechanical process, but then they can't explain the mechanical process of how nothing becomes something. They come with all these concepts such as energy, and they say, oh, energy, we had positive and negative, and it broke up, and we created matter and gravity. What is that nonsense? That's mathematical gibberish. That's all that is. Okay, summary conclusions on good old Dawkins. Here it is. My point, my vision of good old Dawkins, especially on this issue of evolution, more as a scientist, right? He's not a scientist. Scientist doesn't emphasize belief. He should be aware of that, and he's not. Neither are none of these guys out there that do the circuit, talk circuit. Dawkins harps on evidence, proof, and fact. That's why he's not a scientist. That's a preacher. What you see there is a pastor, a guy, Bible-toting, pastor saying, believe, have faith in quantum, in general relativity. That's all he's saying. He's talking about proof and evidence. Why should you believe? Because here we have the evidence. That's why you should believe. And what's the evidence? That a particle can be at two places at once. What's the evidence for a warp, four-dimensional space-time that nobody can even imagine? So obviously they have no evidence, but they say they have proven it, and they say, oh, these people believe in God. So what do you believe in? You believe in four-dimensional space-time. How are you any better than they are? You also are spreading belief. Just like it's a clash of beliefs. That's all it is. That's not science. And he accuses traditional religionists of relying on belief and faith, yet all he talks about is his beliefs and faith. Okay? Dawkins swallows Big Bang and space-time like candy. He gawks and drools at quantum tunneling, entanglement, and particles at two places at once. So how is his stuff any different than what they preach in Sunday school? Therefore, Dawkins' faith is actually more irrational than the one he criticizes, because at least I can imagine God, and making, here, he's got his magic wand, I got mine, okay? And he goes, abracadabra, and suddenly the universe comes to be. Fine, I can imagine at least that. I can imagine God with a magic wand. Cannot really imagine how he made that in zero time. That's something the religionist has to prove or explain, really, right? Explain the mechanism. But Dawkins, he cannot even imagine. I cannot imagine what they're proposing in mathematical physics. So I don't know what he's talking about faith when he accuses the religionists. He is a religionist. Dawkins isn't even a biologist because he can't even define the word life. And biology is the study of life. You can't define the word life, and biology is a study of life, then you are not a biologist until you can. Only then will we know what your discipline is about.